Chris, it's good to see you. I have a really important question. It's all about what is a fiduciary? We hear this all the time. I hear it in the industry that I need to work with a fiduciary. So let's break it down. What does that actually mean?
Erin, great to see you again. And again, it's a great question. It's one of those terms that I'm very proud to say that I am a fiduciary.
Right.
However, I think that the Reader's Digest version, how I've always explained it, is you must put a client's interest ahead of your own. Now that sounds simple, but a lot of people, are say product motivated, how big of a commission or the fees that they get. And we have no problem with folks making money. However, in my industry, if you're going to make money, you have to disclose how you're doing so. So
Hmm.
that's the Reader's Digest version.
Right. Right. I like that. Legally and ethically obligated to act in everybody's best interest. But I knew that about you already, Chris. So
100%.
let's just talk this through then your process. If I am working with the fiduciary, what are the steps that I should expect that will be taken to ensure my financial well-being?
So, first and foremost, financial planning 101 is understanding the client's goals.
Right.
This is one of the things that I think is lacking in the industry is so many folks are out there, whether they be a bank or a financial institution, right? That they're so quick to offer a product before they
Mm,
fully understand a client's needs, goals, desires. And this is the problem is quite often folks will follow, online suggestions or maybe their neighbor's solutions,
mhm.
which aren't applicable to them. They're just
Right.
not appropriate or necessary for the individual. So taking a unique, customized approach to somebody's finances is our process.
Mhm. And part of that process is the fact that you have infinitely customizable, abilities, and one of them is making sure that you are really clear on everybody's unique financial goals. So that's part of what we're looking at here, Chris. Explain it, please.
Yeah, and there's a lot of data here, but the first and foremost, as I'm meeting somebody for the first time, right, what we share is we never want sensitive data, right? We don't need that up front, right? So we don't want your tax returns or your brokerage statements, right? What we need to understand is high level information on where are you at right now. So Erin, when somebody goes, and I use this analogy all the time, suppose you were to go to the mall for the first time, you've never been to this mall and you were looking for a store in this mall and you didn't know exactly where it was, how would you go about getting there? Well, the first place we go to is the directory, right? What's
Absolutely.
the
Yep.
most efficient path to get there? And once you understand where you're at, you can make better decisions on how to get to where you're going.
Mhm.
And that's what our tool, this is a tool we call Retirement Analyzer. And it allows us, versus online versions of financial planning software, it allows us to really start to get into the weeds. And if you look at the next slide, one of the things that we'll do is we'll start to ask folks, what are your current holdings, right? Do you have a 401k? Do you have an IRA? Do you have a brokerage account, savings account, checking account? But more importantly, you'll notice that the tax environment that those are held in are really critical in our future planning, because right now if somebody is putting money away without consideration of how it will be taxed in the future, they could be making a small mathematical error. And then the other area that we absolutely dive into is the expenses, right? What is somebody's expenses while they're working? And then we say, hey, you know what, your expenses are different than your neighbors. And once we understand their budget, well, what your current, people will normally have a sufficient income while they're working, unless they get laid off, right? I just had a client last week that decided they're hanging up their cleats. And nothing gave me greater pleasure than to be able to say, you're going to be fine.
Right.
But this tool allowed us to look into the future, because you saw in that last slide that there was a red line. And that red line sort of, hey, are we going to run out of money? As I teach classes, throughout the United States, workshops, things of that nature, right? One of the number one questions that people will raise their hands to, who here is afraid of running out of money in retirement? And
Absolutely. Mhm.
and that's what this allows us to do, is not just take a boilerplate approach towards planning. This allows us to deep dive onto risk,
Mhm.
right? Risks such as premature death. Now, death is always premature, but what if we lost our job? What if we the market corrected. We just had, banks starting to create question marks for a lot of consumers. Or what happens if you have a long-term care event, right? Something that can completely upend or disheave, make so what's the correct word there? Somebody's future uncertain because they
Yeah.
had a long-term care event.
Right.
So
There are so many variables that go into this. And so the fact that you can go in and plug in like your friend who decided he wanted to retire, then just turn off that income button and see how the rest of his assets will do. That's fantastic.
absolutely. And that's why I love this tool. And again, everybody's unique. And so that's one of the things we do is that we take their unique circumstances, their unique variables, plug them in. And then once we go through this up front, then we don't have to go through that torture multiple times, right? We can adjust on the fly. And it really has been a godsend for most of my clients in the past and on a go forward basis as we approach
Mhm.
these uncertain times.
Mhm. Well, and you and I were talking offline too. I feel like a lot of us just go with the default, which you mentioned earlier, which we have these target date funds, which only rely on one variable, which is the age that you think you'll be when you retire. But there's so many more moving parts than that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I see a lot is that those types of vehicles people will gravitate towards because they were marketed heavily, and B, not necessarily fully understood. Because again, most of them follow the philosophy: the closer you get to retirement or towards a goal, the less tolerance you will have towards risk.
Hmm.
Well, that may be true. However, what is their solution? And by being on autopilot, what they do is they dial in, right? So they dial in to bonds, heavily weighted bonds. Well, right now we're in a rising interest rate environment, and bonds don't like rising interest rates.
Yet they have
So,
not been doing well.
so these are the things that we try and help people to understand things a little bit differently than maybe that they've approached them in the past.
Hmm. So, Chris, anybody who knows you knows that you are all about transparency, full honesty. So, I want to ask, what do you charge?
So, and you just hit the nail on the head. If there's ever a cost to speak to me, I will tell you well in advance as a
Right.
fiduciary, right? Full disclosure. However, for us to do these models initially, typically I will charge $1,500, right?
Hmm.
So it's a small price to pay for somebody to get certainty into their future. However, we waive that for folks that I'm allowed to, and they allow me to manage their funds on a go forward. So
Hmm.
it's just, it depends on people's circumstances, but that's the short answer.
Hmm. I appreciate that, Chris. It's always really helpful to talk to you, and it's really impressive to see all the work that you put into everybody's unique, holistic financial plan. So, if somebody wants to talk to you about seeing if they will have enough money for retirement, because that's such a big question, what's the best way to reach you?
So the first and foremost would be our office phone number. That's 732-302-1810. Right. We have our website. You can reach out to us, right? Professionalplanningservices.com. And we have a couple events that are typically posted there that are upcoming. And then lastly, you can always email me, Chris@professionalplanningservices.com. Love to help. Again, finances are complex for most people. Their puzzles are unique, and we're happy to help and give you our expert opinion. So thank you again, Erin.
Chris, thank you. It's good to talk to you.
Have a great day.